والنور الله لا يعطى العاص لا يعطى العاص
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. Dear respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In the previous episode, we spoke about the classifications of obligatory acts or the classifications of obligation. We spoke about obligation, the definition, and then some masail related to the obligation, the obligatory acts, what leads to an obligatory act, or the format of or the style of textual evidences that lead to obligatory acts, then the classifications of obligatory acts, the different ways of classifying obligatory acts. Now, in this episode, we will need to speak about the second category of Islamic rulings in general. And as you remember, we said the Islamic rulings can be classified into 5 categories: obligation, recommendation, neutral acts, mubah, permissibility, and dislikeness and prohibition. The acts, we say obligatory act, recommended act, permissible act, disliked act, or prohibited act. Now let us come to the second one, which is recommended acts. As you can see from the term itself, this is a recommended act, recommendation. It is not obligation. Means that you are recommended to do it, but you are not obliged to do it. Technically, they say that it is any act, and act, as we said last time, includes physical activity or moral, spiritual, or beliefs. Beliefs maybe is a better terminology. Beliefs or statements that Sharia recommended us to do. Okay, this is technically now the at-ta'rifu bil-athar. The consequence of this is we will be rewarded for that. However, we will not be sinful if we leave those recommended acts. Okay, so we will be rewarded for doing them, and we will not be punished if we leave those recommended acts. Examples of those recommended acts: to be generous. This is highly recommended act. If you are not generous, you are not sinful, provided that you are not stingy. This is generally speaking. We are not talking about specific things. To go to the masjid and to enter the masjid by your right foot. This is a recommended act. Also, to be kind to people in general. This is a recommended act. If you are not that kind of people, but you are not rude to them, then it is okay. You are not going to be punished for that. The 5 daily prayers are fard, but before Fajr there are 2 rak'ah to pray. Before the compulsory 2 rak'ah, there are 2 recommended rak'ah to pray. This is what recommended act. There are 4 rak'ah before the fard dhuhr prayer to be done. The Prophet ﷺ never left them, in like in Hadith Aisha. And in Hadith Habiba, the Prophet ﷺ said 4 rak'ah before Salatul Dhuhr, they are equal to the last part of the night prayer. And so on, 2 rak'ah after Maghrib, 2 rak'ah after Isha. Fasting Mondays, Thursdays, they are recommended acts. Fast 6 days of Shawwal, according to the Jumhur, is a recommended act. The giving a charity, there is the obligatory charity, which is zakah, and there is the recommended charity, which is sadaqah. And you can name it. You can give hundreds of examples of recommended acts. Now, what is the textual style or format that leads to recommended acts? What is the sigha that leads to recommended act? they say that there are a number of styles in Arabic language that lead to recommendation. However, sometimes those styles can be confused with obligation. So that's why they say that recommended acts can be led to by the amr, the fi'l al-amr. Okay, do, perform, establish. However, there will be an external evidence that that indicate that this command from the Sharia is not meant to lead to obligation, but it meant to lead to recommendation. But it came with the command style, because there is no style or pattern in Arabic language or in language in general that leads to recommendation without a command. Okay, so that's why they say that commands in general, or the verb command verb in many cases lead to recommendation if there is an external evidence that confirms that this command is meant for recommendation rather than obligation. Okay, مثلا when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر, okay, فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت. Or maybe we need to give another clear example. مثلا the Sharia said about freeing the slave person. Okay, Allah Jalla wa Ala says فكاتبوهم إن علمتم فيهم خيرا. Okay, فكاتبوهم يعني accept to have this process, kitaba process, with the slave person in order to help him to free himself. Now this فكاتبوهم, this is a command, but it is meant for recommendation, not obligation. Why? Because there is an indication inside the dalil itself that leads to this understanding that this is a recommendation and it is not obligation. Some scholars said because the in alimtum fihim khayra, the phrase was mentioned, this phrase was mentioned, so the command fakatibuhum is not meant for obligation. Some other scholars said no, this is understood from yani Sharia in general, that this kitaba, to allow your slave to have this process for to have this process with you in order to free himself, is not obligatory. There is no dalil to confirm that it is obligatory, and Sharia approved, or in Sharia there are many stories that confirm that there were slaves during the time of the companions and they were not commanded to free them. So they said that it is not obligatory. I don't want to get into the discussion about the word slave, because I don't like this translation to reflect the raqiq system that we have in Islam. Also, among the those acts that lead to a recommendation, those evidences or those textual evidences that recommended us to do certain acts by encouraging or by setting certain reward for them with no obligation or with no commands, with no direct commands. For example, the Prophet ﷺ said, ركعتا الفجر خير من الدنيا وما فيها. The 2 rak'ah before the subh compulsory prayer is better than the whole dunya. So now the Prophet ﷺ is setting a reward for this prayer, which means that he is recommending us to do it, although it is not obligatory upon us to do it. And this is, you can say, the most common style that leads to recommendation. Okay, and we can give hundreds of examples of that. Now, the second main issue regarding the discussion related to sunnah, or related to recommended acts, is to know that recommended acts can take different terms. Sometimes we call recommended acts as sunnah. For example, we say that it is sunnah to pray 2 rak'ah before subh. It is sunnah to fast Mondays and Thursdays. It is sunnah to give sadaqah as much as you can. It is sunnah to perform hajj after the compulsory hajj. It is sunnah to be cheerful to people. It is sunnah to look after your neighbor. It is sunnah to do this and that. Okay? So this is sunnah. Sometimes we call it is mustahab. Now technically speaking, some scholars differentiate between sunnah and mustahab, because they say mustahab is less recommended than sunnah. It is mustahab to enter the masjid with your right foot. It is mustahab to wear perfume when you go to Jum'ah. It is mustahab to have nice, tidy clothes in public, and so on. Sometimes they say that it is tatawwu'. Okay? Tatawwu' means you are doing it voluntarily. Today I woke up late and I did not find enough food. I did not find that it is maybe I don't need to eat. So I said, okay, let me just fast. It is not Monday, it is not Thursday, it is not one of the recommended days to fast. So why are you fasting? Tatawwu'. Yeah, just voluntarily fast. طبعا the Malikis, they are among the scholars who have more details and more classifications for this category. They have al-Raghiba, they have the Ihsan, and so on. They have different names and different classifications for this category. One more point, one more issue about the recommended acts is the fact that recommended acts are recommended throughout the act. For example, I started to pray 2 rak'ah. Then I decided to leave the prayer for whatever reason. Can I do this or not? Yes, you can do this. I started my day fasting, and then in the middle of the day I became tired. Am I obliged to continue the fast? No, you are not obliged to do that. You can break your fast whenever you want. The Prophet ﷺ said, "As-sa'imu amiru nafsihi." As-sa'im is the amir of himself, so he can decide for himself. Except certain acts, limited acts, very few acts. Among them is Hajj and Umrah. Okay, some scholars said except Hajj and Umrah only. So if you start the voluntary Hajj, you cannot leave it at any point you want. Same thing with Umrah. وَأَتِمُّ الْحَجَّ وَالْعُمْرَةَ لِلَّهِ. Allah Jalla wa Ala says. So if you start Hajj, you must complete your Hajj, even if it is a voluntary Hajj. If you start Umrah, you must finish your Umrah, even if it is a voluntary Umrah. Okay? These are the main masail related to recommended acts. This will be enough, inshallah. Now see, my dear respected brothers and sisters, Usul al-Fiqh is a very rational related ilm. As we said, Ibn Khaldun praised ilm al-Usul because it is a ilm where you are using your aql and naql as well, both together, hand in hand. So because it uses rational argument and rational deduction and rational classification, I recommend that you draw trees for classifications. And there are some طلاب العلم who made trees for all of Usul al-Fiqh. Tashdir, it's called Tashdir Usul al-Fiqh. So if you can do this while we are discussing Usul al-Fiqh, that will be good. If you can have like a diagram or a flow chart for any of the masail that we discuss, or for Usul al-Fiqh in general, that will be excellent. And inshallah we will include it in the notes. Jazakum Allah khaira. Barakallahu feekum. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.